We have lost a bit of time, and we hope that we shall work and catch up. I want to thank the President of the Pan-African Parliament for appointing me and my colleagues to chair this conference, and we pledge to ensure that work is done in the interest of our populations. I will now invite the first presenter on the topic Challenges and Opportunities, Dr. Richmond Timoko, Regional Advisor, Population Dynamics, UNFPA East and Southern Africa, to take the floor. He will have 10 minutes for the presentation. Dr. Timoko.
Your Excellency, before I start, I would really like to congratulate you and the member of the Bureau. And as we start discussing the issue of investing in youth to harness demographic dividend in Africa, I think we couldn't have had a better choice than having strong women leaders leading this process. So we are very happy to be here. Excellencies, Honorable Speaker of Parliament, my name is Richmond Timoko. I'm the Policy Advisor on Population Issues at UNFPA Regional Office for East and Southern Africa. It's really a pleasure and honor for me to be here today. And I would like to extend the greetings of my director, Dr. Julita Onabanjo, who would have loved to be here. She was here, actually, your invitee last year. But unfortunately, currently, she's on leave. What I would like us to go through quickly is to look at demographic dividend, harnessing demographic dividend. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? Chair, I was expecting the PowerPoint presentation with some pictures that I wanted us to look at them together, but if it's not possible, we can let go. Demographic dividend, I think the first step I would like us to look at is what I call the conceptual issues. What is demographic dividend? What are the challenges? And how do we achieve that? The first step is really building on what Her Excellency Honorable Speaker from Mozambique said earlier, changing actually the discourse on young people, changing our discourse on how we present population issues and how we present youth issues, and adopting a positive approach. But quickly, what is demographic dividend that we are going to talk about? From a purely scientific perspective, demographic dividend is the economic benefit that can arise when the country has a relatively large proportion of working age population, and this due to declining fertility, and then effectively investing in the health, employment, education of that population. Specifically, demographic dividend The economic benefits that arise when you have a change in population structure. And this happens when birth rate decline and the population structure shift from the younger group to the working age. Let's quickly look at the graphic there. What we are talking about is the two pyramids at the left corner down, where you have a typical triangle in the first one, and then another triangle, what I'll call in general the basket, at least from what I've seen, a basket from Burundi and Rwanda, that basket with a larger middle and a slightly reduced base. So the transition is from the left side to the right side. In other words, the green section of that picture represents young people under the age of 15. Each horizontal bar represents 5 years. So the green are young people under 18. The orange or yellow, depending on how we see it, represent the working population of the country. And then on top, represent the elderly, 65 and above. So demographic dividend happen when first you have a transition from the large base population structure to the basket that we see there. But that's not enough. Changing the population structure is not enough to harness the demographic dividend. It's just a potential. And we have seen countries in the world that have had a change in population structure, but unfortunately, the dividend is still waiting. So for the dividend to be real, it's important to invest in key areas, including in education, in employment, in social cohesion, in what are even called solidarity among the generations. But the first challenge we have, and from our own country, is really even the whole issue or concept of working age. What I presented earlier and what you will see in many documents is roughly 15 to 64. That's how we define working age. But is that correct? What about child labor? What about people who are working, but actually the work cannot sustain life, or at least life with dignity? What is the working age if people are not employed, if they are not educated? And this is a challenge that you are familiar with in your constituencies. I present there few figures, and this we can extend it to many other countries. South Africa, where we are now, Botswana, Swaziland, and Tunisia. Look at unemployment rate there. So the change in population structure may not be enough, but is the first condition. So that will be our first challenge. From a purely technical perspective, I would also like to share with you how we go about addressing the issue of decent work or being in a working age population and not working. The next slide, please. The next slide will show you a representation of how an individual from birth to death contributes to production, to economic growth, and also consume. What we call the national, sorry, I think they missed that. Anyway, so we look at an individual from birth, and it's shown that what we call the dependency, when a child is born, he or she starts consuming, and that consumption goes up until it reaches a certain level in the adult age. While that person starts producing later on. So in other words, if we take a particular trajectory of a child, it means the person is consuming on credit. Today we'll talk about credit cards. The person is consuming without producing, and start producing later on to either pay back that consumption. It's not directly to him or to her, but to pay back to the next generation. And you need to produce more to cover that deficit and make provision for the later age. But if people are not working, or if the work they are doing is not sustaining, then that credit card, just as an expression, will not be fully paid. That's what we are talking about when we say investing in young people. If Africa has the largest youth population as we are talking about, it is critical that investments are made so that the consumption covered during life is fully paid by the production. And then it means addressing the key challenges that young people face. The first one, as we know, is really to help them transit from childhood to healthy, productive adulthood. What are the challenges related to that? And we could look at the pathway of maybe a girl child and see what could be the challenge that will prevent that person, a girl child, or for that matter, any young person, to really transit from childhood to healthy, productive adulthood and to aging with dignity. We feel there are two paths that we can consider. One is either the child under the red line has challenges early in life because of the parents or the mother did not have sufficient nutrition, sufficient services. So from childhood, there are already challenges that need to be addressed. But let's suppose that the child survives until adolescent. Then from there, you have the issue of either being educated or not, or being forced into marriage. And we know that with these two, when the person is not educated, when the person as a child is forced into marriage, there are dire consequences, not only for that person, but for the community and for the society. And it may even increase not only the consumption burden, but reduce the production to pay in court that credit card that we have. But if we use the other approach, where the child is protected, the mother is protected, and have enough nutrition when she was even pregnant.
If you could be winding up, please. If you could wind up, please, Dr. Timoko.
Yes. Then the person will go through a green light, which will help the continent to reap the demographic dividend that is ensuring that the person is educated, the person married at adult age, the person has a healthy life and has a decent job and age graciously in dignity. So what we are saying is based on this constraint that African Union developed the roadmap, the 4 pillars. But quickly, what I want to present to you here is first to congratulate the countries. On the map, you have countries in Africa that have officially launched the theme of the year, or the African Union theme of the year, harnessing demographic dividend through investment in youth. The green one are the ones that have launched it. The yellow and orange one are countries that have done substantive study on demographic dividend and use it to inform their policy. And here I want to highlight, identify Zambia that really used the demographic dividend study to develop the 7 national development plan. But we can only achieve the demographic dividend if we address those challenges facing young people and young girls in particular. Make sure that they transit into adulthood. And for that, we have many opportunities on the continent. The first one is the fact that demographic dividend is included in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, what we call, in short, Sustainable Development Goal. It's also included in the Agenda 2063. And before that, the African continent, in fact, was the first to link demographic dividend to development issues through the review of the ICPD, the International Conference on Population and Development. The second opportunity that we have is the legal and policy instrument that the African Union and also Parliament you have developed. We are talking about the Youth Charter, we are talking about the Maputo Plan of Action, we are talking about many other frameworks that you have at national level, including the SADC model law on child marriage. The third opportunity we have, and I'll probably hand here, I'll hand here, is a large pool of young people who are willing to contribute and to work directly with you, with the Parliament, with the leaders to contribute. As I say, the youth on this continent are ready to really move the discourse from a negative discourse on young people to a positive one and make sure that the population issue in Africa is an asset. It's an asset that we can build on it to develop our continent. On this, I thank you for your attention, and sorry for the mishap on the PowerPoint, but the final document will be shared with you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Timoko. I now invite Madam Sarah Enao Anyang at the African Union Commission. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. His Excellency, Honorable Roger Nkodo Dang, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Excellencies, Ambassadors, Honorable Jida Mama Mahamad, Chairperson of the Pan-African Parliamentarian Caucus on Youth, Honorable Speakers of Regional Parliaments, CEMAC, ECOWAS, EALA, SADCPF, and Arab Parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am honored and humbled to have been invited to participate and engage with the continent's legislators at the 9th Annual Conference of Speakers of African Parliaments. Our presence here today under 2017 African Union Theme of the Year, harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in youth, demonstrates our collective stance on responding to the challenges of Africa's youth and building an Africa that is making significant strides in the realization of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. In fact, the Department of Human Resources, Science and Technology focus is the development of skills and empowerment of women and youths for sustainable development through social inclusion. The need to empower and develop our young people has been a focus of organizations, including the African Union Commission, for decades. But as our youthful population increases, the discourse and response has intensified. As we speak today, the linkage between harnessing the potential of the youth and progress on our continent is all too clear. With 60% of Africa's population aged 35 years and below, it is evident that as the years go by, it is urgent for Africa to devise and implement the necessary policies that will ensure that their quality of life and opportunities are enhanced. And Africa is set on the road to achieving Agenda 2063. A popular African proverb says, "It is the young trees that make up the forest." Therefore, involving young women and men as partners in the implementation of Agenda 2063 is not an option, but a must for the success of the agenda. The youths are the treasure of our continent, as is said today, and they are the leaders of tomorrow. Our current demographic structures in many African states present us with the opportunity to stimulate growth and stability through strategic and deliberate investments in the youths. The opportunity or demographic debt dividend will not be harnessed with a business-as-usual approach, and due to the intricate nature of population dynamics, we only have one chance to reap this dividend. In response to this critical phase in our aspiration for a better continent, African heads of state and government dedicated the year 2017 to investing in the youths through the theme, Harnessing the Demographic Dividend Through Investment in Youth, which was unveiled at the 26th Ordinary Session of the African Union. Our leaders confirmed the high level of priority that should be placed on youth issues. The decision further called on the African Union Commission and partners to develop a roadmap of key deliverables and expedite the implementation of a continental initiative on demographic dividend for Africa. The African Union Commission got to work with its partners to conduct extensive consultations across the continent with all key stakeholders, including young people. The consultative sessions resulted in a draft roadmap that was subsequently adopted by the African Union at the 27th Ordinary Session in July 2016. The African Union Roadmap on Harnessing the Demographic Dividend Through Investment in Youth identifies 4 thematic pillars of investment that are a prerequisite to our goal. The first, employment and entrepreneurship. Second, education and skills development. Third, health and well-being. 4, rights, governance, and youth empowerment. The roadmap outlines key actions and deliverables under each pillar and calls for the need to be guided by the core principles of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 to facilitate effective implementation and adopt a people-centered approach that leaves no one behind. It is important to note that the Assembly of the African Union declares 2018 to 2027 period African Decade for technical, professional, and entrepreneurial training of youth employment. Consequently, the Assembly of the African Union requests the Commission, in collaboration with Burkina Faso and partners of the African Union, to develop a detailed plan of action for the decade and set up a continental dialogue platform on skills development in Africa. The plan of action should be submitted in the next ordinary session of the Assembly in January 2018 through the competent organs. Excellencies and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the development of our continent is a task shared by many, including our honorable parliamentarians across Africa. As identified in the roadmap, implementation of key actions and deliverables require an environment that is willing and enabling. Policies, legislation, and advocacy for implementation play a significant role in the creating of these spaces where work on the 4 pillars can be conducted in the most efficient manner possible. We have also been working at the African Union Commission to ensure that honorable parliamentarians gathered here today do not bear all the responsibility of delivering on the roadmap, since Africa's development is a responsibility that should be shared by its citizens. For our citizens to be fully on board, it is imperative that we frame the demographic dividend to reflect the African reality and thus connect with populations. The need for this paradigm shift in the demographic dividends discourse was reaffirmed by the African Union during the 29th Ordinary Session last month, July 2017, in Addis Ababa. African heads of state and government called on I quote, the African Union Commission to champion the framing and branding of the demographic dividend to reflect the African reality, to build ownership of the concept by Africans from the highest levels of heads of state and government, ministers, parliamentarians, policymakers, and youths. To this end, the Department of Human Resources, Science and Technology at the African Union Commission recently engaged young African media professionals to lend their expertise and heed the call to branding the demographic dividend.
Please.
The overall output of their work will lead to a media campaign that will seek to enhance knowledge and trigger youth-led action related to the 4 pillars among youths in Africa. In the spirit of collective responsibility for our development, the campaign will unearth the youth's role and dismantle the common perception that government is wholly responsible for development in a country. Through the convening of this meeting, recognition of the importance of the 2017 theme, and my invitation here demonstrates just how highly the Pan-African Parliament places the empowerment of our youths and demographic dividend agenda. This commitment is very much welcomed by the African Union Commission, and we are confident that through our engagements, we will be able to carve out a progressive path forward that will play an integral role in harnessing the potential of our dynamic youthful population. Africa needs to be emergent, strong, and a force to be reckoned with. African governments need to transform education and skills development, health and well-being, rights, governance, and make Africa, our Africa, a model. The youths are the gateway to these achievements, and you, honorable parliamentarians, you are the voice, our voice, to ensure that this is implemented in the various African member states. I would like to conclude by wishing the Excellencies and distinguished guests fruitful deliberations. May God help us in our endeavors and aspiration to create the African we want. I thank you. Please, we have copies of this Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and the African Union Roadmap on harnessing demographic dividend through investment in youth available. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Madam B. Enao Anyang, for giving us that update. Distinguished colleagues, we've had 2 presentations, one on the challenges and the opportunities, and then the African Union's plan of action for skilling the people of Africa. We have about 40 minutes of discussion. I have a few requests. I'll start with the Speaker of Madagascar, the Honorable Rakoto Manana, to be followed by the Honorable Bagbin of Ghana. Speaker of Madagascar. It's not there? Mr. Bagbin then, can you kick off the debate? Mr. Bagbin, the Honorable Bagbin will be followed by The Honorable Jacob Francis Mudenda of Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker of our brotherly and sisterly country. It's always a pleasure to see you chairing sessions, and I'm happy that I'm having the first bite. The topic for discussion is so crucial that we will need to, after this, commission a technical team to look through the presentations from various countries and see how we can harness a comprehensive document for consideration of the continent. It's true that Africa is experiencing a serious demographic transition, and some people are seeing it as positive, particularly not even looking within our continent, but looking outside our continent because of the aging population of Europe and America. It is anticipated that in the next 50 years, most of the European countries will be in a very vicious cycle of attrition. Greece, in particular, is having a fertility rate of 1.1%, and that is on a journey of no return. In other words, they will not be able to survive. That race is likely to perish within a few years. The average in Europe is 1.3.